Welcome to Enrich Scotland's Rich Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rosie Ashworth, the Patient and Public Involvement Lead for Enrich Scotland, and I will be co-hosting this series with Denise Munro, our Patient and Public Involvement Officer. This short podcast series will explore research in care homes and the important work being done. We will be speaking to the people behind the research, including people working in care homes and family members, on why care home research makes a difference. This podcast was co-designed with people in the care home community, including family members and staff.
In this episode, we're chatting to people that work in care homes and support care home research. We'll hear the perspectives of care home managers and staff about the importance of care home research, the challenges of research, and how to increase involvement and collaboration. We're joined by care home managers Kirsty, Cartin and Shona MacDonald. Cheryl Henderson, a previous care home manager, who is now an Education and Dementia Coordinator, and we also speak to Enrich Scotland's Clinical Studies Officer, Diane Frew, who provides on-the-ground support to care home research. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your involvement in care home research?
Hi, so I'm Diane. I work with Enrich Scotland. I'm a clinical studies officer based in Greater Glasgow and Clyde. So basically I am trying to encourage care homes in the Greater Glasgow and Clyde area to participate and make them aware of ongoing research, which is part of my job role.
Hi, my name is Kirsty Cartin and I'm the manager of Rashley Care Home in Erskine. I have been the manager here for about 3 years now, and I've worked in a home for 15 years. I've always worked in social care, so I've always been around the care home environment.
My name is Shona MacDonald. I am a nursing home manager of Braeburn Home, which is a small nursing home in Edinburgh. I've worked in nursing homes since I qualified about 12 years ago, and I love it. Got involved in sort of research and things through CHIP in Edinburgh and making those connections, and now I am well known not to say no to things, so get approached quite frequently.
That's grand. I'm Cheryl Henderson. I'm a lot older than Shona, so I have been around in care homes for much longer, 30 something years. Hard to believe, I know. And I worked in one home for 18 years and was manager, but it wasn't for me. So primarily I do training and dementia development within the organisation here, which is a 90-bedded care home, private care home, over two homes. And my responsibility is to update the staff, but I've also been very involved, which is how I knew Shona, through the training and research-based care home project, Torch. And their offshoot CHIP, which is a care home innovation partnership, which now sits within Enrich. So I'm much more aware of research than I ever used to be, and can actually finally see its relevance. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting us.
It's great to have you here, and to have that mix of experience and wealth of experience is always very welcomed. And good to see that this research stuff is kind of coming more to the fore, which is what you want to see, isn't it?
First, we discussed everyone's experiences with care home research and why research is important.
Could you tell us a bit about what research means to you?
I suppose it means moving forward, improving our practice and just getting better all the time, and being able to inform that practice as well.
Yeah, she's nicked my answers, because essentially I've written down the same thing: informing the future, but also at the forefront of best practice. We will hear about best practice, but how do you come about it other than by research? And I think sometimes when you're in some sort of profession, particularly nursing, you just know best practice is there, but you don't necessarily recognise that you can be part of informing that for the future. So certainly that's my take on research.
And Diane?
I feel like this is a bit of a difficult one, and I can be a bit biased because research is part of my job, so I do have like a high value of it. And I think like the most basic things that we do in everyday life comes from research. Like everything we do is researched we research simple things like going on holiday. We try and figure out the best deals. We look and delve deep into what we're doing all the time. So it's important within our society. So without it, it's pretty much, we wouldn't ask any questions without it. Like, we wouldn't understand any more. It makes us more curious, more understanding, and more accepting of change as well. Once we know something works, we're more willing to change. And I think when we're not the best at change, we're not the best at accepting change as a society, but once we know something, oh, that looks like it's good, and there's facts to kind of prove and say this is a better option, then we're more accepting of doing that. So also, I think it's the best.
And Kirsty?
So to me, care home research is about looking at how things are done. It's about evaluating that and finding if there's a better way to do things. And that could either be through studies where a way is implemented that people should try out, or through looking at data and seeing this is what people have found in the past. Let's find out what the best way of doing things is. I suppose it's about finding new knowledge.
So I was going to add to that, I guess, and ask, what has been your experience with research?
So I'll go first this time. So my experience with research has generally been positive. We haven't done a huge amount directly, but there are times where it seemed really onerous. I think, and I was really reflecting on this, and I think a lot of it is because it's a different world, it's a different language, and they do like an acronym. But then nursing does, care does. But if it's a language you're not familiar with, there is this real tendency to back off from it. And I hadn't registered that I had done that quite a lot. But the research that we have been involved with and the researchers have been really positive. And certainly for me, if there's an enthusiastic researcher and one who is relatable, one who can actually say things that you understand rather than a whole load of words that you've no idea what they are, it really makes a difference. And I think that's been something that's been very obvious to me, although research is a lot to do with paperwork and documentation and stuff. One of the big things for me has been the personal side of it, and that's what's engaged me more, I think, than anything else within research. So generally, as I say, it has been positive, but with these kind of little stumbling blocks, if you like, that are very easy to say, actually, this is above and beyond my job, so do you know what, I'm going to shelve that for now.
Yeah. I think with my experience is quite similar. You stayed away from research because I didn't understand it particularly. And until I got involved more with the CHIP, with CHIP and Torch, and sort of being a bit more exposed to research and making those connections, it was so much better, because people would explain to me like what they needed, why they needed it, which you don't always get, and like what they hoped the outcome would be, potentially, depending on what it was. And then I've now been able to work with a few different teams on various research projects and pilots and things. And the communication has been really good between the teams. But the amount of work that I had to do for some of them, for example, like just pulling all of the MAR charts together and sending them over, it was like forcing me to be organized with that, which I maybe wasn't always quite on top of, and things like that. So yeah, it would it's been quite a learning curve.
It does really encourage you to up your game, I think, is something, because you have an external person looking at you, but for a very different reason than maybe the care inspector or somebody that might.
And Diane?
So from working in the care homes to then taking on a more research-led position, I think for me personally, I think it is. So I started working in care homes when I was about 17, and then I went on and done my nursing, and then I worked in an older adult organic acute assessment ward before I done the research. So, but I remember lots, like, because I was so bouncy about and jumpy and very happy and very curious and wanting to talk to everybody, wanting to know what's going on with everybody. And I always found, like, at times people were left out, like, why is that? And I always, like, noticed, like, non-verbal behaviours and always questioned everything. And I think that's why I felt like I really understood the people and understood them more on a personal level, and that they are a person that deserves everything. It's their home. But a lot of the residents kind of, like, said to me, like, about the research and about making the change. I think, like, I felt like I could do more if I encouraged, like, if I was at this level, I felt like I could push it a bit more. And I felt like I wasn't doing much there. Not that I wasn't doing a lot, but I mean, like, I thought it would be easier to kind of encourage people when they see you in this position. Like, you kind of know what you're talking about a bit more. You're not this person, you're kind of more evolved in a sense, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does. Thank you. That was a lovely answer. It was very heartwarming.
I would even say, like, in the last 8 years, maybe. Like, I personally, when I was working in the care home, I never knew anything, and that was only like 7 or 8 years ago. Like, when I was working in the care home, and there was no mention about research. It was just, it's more the involvement of care homes being involved in research that I feel that's progressing. And you're getting, like, I feel like staff and residents and family members are getting more opportunities to have their say and make a change and make a difference. Whereas before it was kind of, people were being looked in on and you didn't really have a say. And I found that quite frustrating when I was working in the care home, because, like, you know what's going on. You know the best. You live and work in it every day. Like, why is nobody coming to me and asking me the questions that need to be answered? And I think it's just kind of important to recognise that although the research might have not changed, like specifically the way it's done and the way it's tailored, the involvement of care home staff, researchers, residents, and everyone kind of coming together has significantly changed, like, and people are more aware of research and how they can be a part of it, which is good.
And it's nice to hear that that outreach and collaboration is improving. You've seen that over the last 7 or 8 years. That reflects the goals of Enrich voices as well. So it's nice to hear that you've seen that progression happen.
When I first came back to sort of hearing about Enrich and hearing about research, to me, in my mind, research was at university looking at these big long documents and trying to put them into standard English to be able to understand. And when I spoke to colleagues, the first thing that came to their head was walking up Buchanan Street and being stopped by somebody with a clipboard and asking you to go and test things. So for me, realising over the past year, it's been something more enriching than that. And for me personally, my experience of research has mainly been the staff involvement. So it's been myself and colleagues talking to researchers about their particular studies, although we have had one study now that involved residents, which has been enlightening for us because that was a grey area that we were always a wee bit concerned about how that works. But yeah, most of the studies that we've been involved in have been talking to somebody through the COVID pandemic. It's mainly been talking to somebody through a Zoom or a Teams call and answering questions which have led to other questions about specific matters.
I had a quick kind of question about within that. You're saying about having Zoom calls, and I know that there's a lot of more research going on Zoom as a result of the pandemic. Do you think that's increased your opportunity for research, or has it been a bit barrier to research having a lot of this move to online?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I think it's increased opportunities in that you couldn't possibly expect to travel everywhere to be involved in research, or for a researcher to travel to you, because that would be a lot of valuable time. But at the same time, I suppose when it comes to, for example, residents, it could be more difficult for them because they don't have the technical knowledge to go onto a Zoom call, and it can be like it could be simple things. We've seen it over the pandemic that residents have been talking to loved ones on Zoom or WhatsApp videos, and they have a very tendency to touch the screen, and then recording stops, everything, you get pop-ups everywhere. So there are a lot of the technical dynamics can be difficult, and that doesn't just mean for the residents. We've got a lot of staff that are quite apprehensive about doing things through Teams and Zoom calls and prefer a face-to-face environment.
Next, we discussed the benefits of research involvement.
The next question we had was around the benefits, I suppose, of research involvement. So would you be able to give an example of how your involvement in research has benefited you or someone you know or the care home industry generally, whichever you find more applicable to you, I guess?
I think from a personal perspective and from talking to staff, because that's most of the studies that we had been involved with already, I think it's very empowering being involved in research. It's empowering to know that your experience and your knowledge is being used, and it's more importantly than being used, it's the being listened to. And I think coming out of the COVID pandemic, that was really powerful for staff to know that somebody was taking the time to listen to their experience, and hopefully that will lead to a change in how that is experienced by others in the future. I think that same context can apply to residents, because residents coming into care homes can quite often feel that they aren't contributing to wider society anymore. And they do in so many ways, but to have somebody again who's sitting listening to their experience and they know that they can be helping somebody else. But it also, for example, when Jenny Burton came into the care home to do her research study and it was on a tea party, it was fun. So it was great fun for them at the same time. The other thing I think about research and the benefits to us is the knowledge that we get. So as much as we're sharing knowledge with other people, quite often I've been involved in studies where a word or a concept or an idea has came up in discussion, and I'm thinking, well, I don't actually know what that is. And it makes me want to learn more. So it makes me want to go back and find out more about it. That answer made my heart glow a little bit.
I know.
It was lovely to hear that.
So I do 2 roles. So I'm part of the NDN and Enrich. So I think being involved in clinical trials, you can kind of see how much that makes people feel valued, like they are making a difference, especially the Alzheimer's trials. It's like, although it might not help them at that present time, they know, oh, this will be beneficial for the future. And even the Huntington's trials as well, which is more of an observational kind of study that is yearly followed up. You see how people think this is important for me to do. So it is putting value on how people view themselves, and they're not just somebody with an illness, they're somebody who can take part, make a change, and be part of making a difference to the condition. I just find that so heartwarming and humbling. It's like, it's so nice to be involved and hear people's stories and listen to them, and they're so willing to do it, really.
I think some of the benefits for my staff is, apart from the fact that they go, oh, not another pilot, not another bit of research, because I don't really say no to things, they can see that they're going to make a difference, that they're getting access to lots of different things, lots of new things that maybe a lot of other homes don't, especially working with some of the quality improvement teams. We're getting to be part of pilots and things that we wouldn't afford to be able to do otherwise. And they're getting like a lot put into them. They're learning loads and loads of stuff, and they're able to see what their feedback is doing, the outcomes of that, rather than it just going off into the distance and never to be seen again, as often it feels like. We give lots of information to lots of people and sometimes it never comes back. But with research-based stuff, it comes back to you and it says, right, well, this has helped us inform this practice or that practice, and this is how we're going to move forward with it. So for my staff, that's been really, they've felt like they're doing something worthwhile, despite the fact that they're having to do it quite a lot.
We have been part of some, but not as many as Shona has. But you touched there on the QI stuff. I mean, I hadn't even registered that QI is different than research. You know, there's a lot of kind of crossovers of things. So we've been involved in some projects, but the sort of facilitating people's PhD projects has been quite an interesting one. And I think sometimes people are involved in research and don't realize they're involved in it. In that, you know, obviously if they're signing consent forms and things, it's fine. But sometimes it's seems more subtle, or somebody is, you know, rolling something out or whatever. And touching on what Shona said there, that, you know, everyone with the SSSC, NMC, AHCP, whatever it is for the physios, the allied health professional one. Yeah, again, as I say, everyone likes a good acronym. Because of that, they all have to do their CPD. But a lot of research involves, well, have a read of this, or this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing, this is what historically has happened, what do you think should happen from now? So I think it's that being listened to thing, and being part of something, you know, bigger in the future. But it's trying to, the owners, and, you know, let's just be very pragmatic about it here, having a voucher for whatever, which is what many people actually will do. And I'd done something because it was of interest to me about a Dementia Champions course, and I just didn't think about it. You said, you know, where shall I send you voucher? I'd totally forgotten about it because that wasn't why I did it. But for some of the carers, it's great, especially in this day and age. But again, it's like, oh, actually, maybe my voice is worth something. And I think that's really important, because it's not something on a day-to-day basis that we maybe emphasize enough.
I suppose a follow-on from that slightly, I guess, is that obviously the feedback and the outputs of research are so important, particularly in this kind of applied research and research, whether that's in quality improvement or whether it's in kind of wider research questions. And is there a kind of preferred format that you found has worked best for making sure that researchers loop that back to you? Because I guess some research can be quite quick and others can take quite a long time. PhD students, for example, you might not get some of those findings for quite some time. Is there kind of a preferred mechanism that works to get that feedback back to you?
I'd say probably for us, it's that person touch again. It's the person actually taking the time to come and to say, this is what the findings are. Because I don't think I'm alone in that. If you get a very long, you know, report, I read the beginning bit, I look for my name, and then I read the conclusion. Now, if I am the only person, then I am very sorry. But, you know, if they're written well, great. And then you want to look at others. But what's better is for somebody to say, there you go, there's the report. Yeah, read the conclusion by all means, and there's your name in lights. But this is what it means. This is what we've actually found. I was involved in some many years ago, and it was just brilliant. And a book was actually produced from it, and it was just fantastic. But what was the crunch thing was 3 people coming and saying, here we are, this is the launch. You're part of us. You were part of the voice for this, and this is what happened, this is what we found. And that was just amazing.
Yeah, and that kind of, what does it actually mean for you? What does it mean on the ground? You know, because I think, yeah, and I think it helps researchers to sit and think about that a little bit, because it's very easy to get lost in that kind of the big picture of what your research might mean, but actually sometimes it's just, how is it going to change someone's day tomorrow, that can be really helpful. And I think hopefully we're seeing a bit more of a shift to that more applied, like, how does this make a difference focus?
Next, we discuss the challenges experienced by care homes participating in and supporting research.
So as well as the, you know, some of these things that we think would make it easier for research involvement and things, has there been any particular challenges that you think have come up with research that maybe have put you off research or might put residents off research, or any challenges you faced around that?
This time I would say probably all the stuff that we've mentioned before, you know, the not being applicable, not being accessible, the language being too onerous, and just thinking, oh, this is going to be too much. If there's a lot involved, and we have come across some projects where they're like, oh no, you haven't got to do anything, and then actually you really do. And, when a researcher says we need this, well, that's fine. But actually, sometimes it's not as easy to get as that. And we have a day job. We have a job where we're looking after really vulnerable people, and we have to be there. We have to be there to look after them and whatever. And we've got recruitment issues, you've got staffing issues and stuff. So, it can be a real problem, a real issue. Within that, I think not having those clear explanations is difficult, not knowing exactly what you're doing, when you're doing it, why you're doing it. And time's just like one of the biggest issues, because we don't have loads of it. But if somebody's interested, like myself and Shona, we're here because we've made the time to do it. But that's not as straightforward as just saying, yeah, no problem, because we've got nothing else to do. It doesn't work like that. So time, I think, is probably one of the biggest ones, but it's that accessibility, and it's that, why am I doing it? I know why I come to work. Why I come to work. And I know what I'm doing when I get home. I have a dog, so as opposed to a cat. So it's looking at those signs. So
I totally agree. Time is the biggest one. I think, especially in care homes, because very few care homes all do the same way of collecting data. Although we all have to collect the same data and a lot of the same information, lots of homes collect it differently. And depending on the system that you use, depends on how easy it is to pull that information and share it out. If you're on paper, you'll be there for days. Online, depending on the system you use, it's nice and quick, it's not a bother. But yeah, pulling all that information, if you're not expecting to have to, takes huge amounts of time. And sometimes you have to say, well, I'd love to be part of this, but I can't take 3.5 hours, 4 hours a day, 2 days to pull all this, because I have my own job to do.
Yeah, so it's kind of not just time in terms of the time it takes you to do things, but actually that realistic representation of time from researchers, so that when you're asked to do something, they know exactly, or at least have a better idea of what that really looks like in practice.
Yeah. And it's good when they say to you, well, this is the kind of information we would like. So how's the easiest way to get that? Because you can then help say, well, I can't give you that, but I can give you this and this and this and this, because that'll take me half the time. And even for this meeting podcast, it's great. I've got a do not disturb sign on my door. We've had to put up an extra do not disturb sign on my door so nobody comes in. I'm still expecting there to be a knock on the door at some point, because it doesn't matter. I'm the home manager. I'm in the home today. If something goes wrong, I need to be there.
yeah. I think when researchers get it, the best researchers I've worked with actually have worked in care homes. Whether it's been that they've done some voluntary work because they're researchers, they will just want to see what it does. The ones that aren't so much are the ones who just really haven't got a clue. And again, they're probably the same people that aren't as personable and aren't as engaging and as clear about what they want. Their focus is purely academic. Whereas, and it's, I don't know, I don't think it's fair to say, but with some people, one in particular that springs to mind from years ago, it was more about, I need to get this research done to get my name in lights, as opposed to, I want to make a difference. The people that want to make a difference are actually the ones that I think we would engage with, far quicker. And they're the ones that will say, actually, we get it. The other thing is that I think because we are, as a breed generally, very good to say yes, very bad at saying no. If you say no, you do feel really guilty. And to have that, when we said no to something quite recently, and it really braced myself. And yet all that came back was, yeah, totally get it. Yeah, no problem. I know you're doing this, you're doing this. Do you know what? That's great. But, it doesn't hurt us to ask. And that's great, because I don't think you should be led to feel like that.
And why would you want to take part if you're scared that, that saying no, or things coming up, or someone knocking on your door could make a very negative experience? But I think something that I don't think we captured yet on the podcast, Denise, it's something that just struck there about this idea that actually a lot of what we're trying to do, I think, in this newer approach to research and more co-produced research and stuff is about moving away from these kind of individual, more ego naming lights. They're the person you associate and going, no, actually we're trying to get everyone's voice up there. We're trying to get this more kind of collective motion of this is a group of voices that have got the shared opinion, rather than kind of going, this is the one person you should be focusing on. And I don't think I'd thought of it like that. In terms, you articulated it much better than my brain was thinking it, so that was just really helpful to think about.
I think certainly for me, we had the couple of care home conferences last year, and one of them in Richard got a big stand, and they actually had some active research there. And they had another one that they had research where you just walked along this thing, and they actually said that this is research. You have participated. These are the findings. It was as quick as that. And it was just one of these really like, I get it now. Bit slow on the uptake, but it's a way of being able to sort of actively show what's happening, but in a meaningful way, because the one that they had set up at the other conference was the listening chair. So it was like, actually, yeah, why do I want to come to work? What does make me tick? What do I do to cope? And actually it gave you that little bit of reflective time away. So it was actually useful and interesting. Whereas others have just been, you're reading what they want you to do, and you're reading it. So that's not really helpful.
In my job, the challenges I have faced in regards to disseminating research to care homes, and I feel like at times you don't know, because I'm only sending it to the managers, I don't know if this information is being shared with everyone it needs to be shared with. I feel at times the information could be gatekept. I don't know. I can't guarantee, and I'm almost relying upon the managers to kind of share with their staff, because it needs to filter down in order for it to be effective. But how do we really know it's been filtered down? That's my question. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges. I think it's trying to figure out a way to reach staff, but I can't exactly get loads of staff's personal emails, which is just kind of a data protection thing. I think there must be other means to reach staff and families and people that you want to reach without breaking any rules, essentially, and just to kind of ensure that that information is out there. I know the forms of Twitter and all that can be beneficial, but people do need to follow you as well for them to see the information that you're putting out. So it's about advertising it all. It can be challenging to get people involved and on board. As I said before, like, people are kind of stuck in their ways, and if you're not enthused about something and you're not feeling like, oh, this will really help me at the time, then you're not going to be as forthcoming, which can be quite challenging. It's trying to like radiate positivity to other people, which is probably more challenging than you would think.
If someone's very personable, it helps massively. If it's nice and easy to do, if they're realistic about what they want from you and from your staff and your residents, then bash on. I'd be happy to look after them and help them out. If they're going to give my staff a wee box of chocolates, a wee voucher, a wee something, even better, because the staff will be much more likely to do it.
Yeah, and to know that they're making a difference, and to potentially have that difference sort of conveyed to them in, some sort of training aspect. We were involved in something, and the person came in to do training and to observe training, whatever. And although people at a level think, oh, training, I'd much rather have some chocolates. Actually, well, you can potentially have both, but it meant that they had time for their CPD, but without a doubt, everyone was going, I get it. All right. Okay. Oh, that's really interesting. And then you see them actually out working it. And we have a particular one more involved in QI than research. But actually, one of the people in particular really got it. So we were reviewing statistics, and this external person said, oh, this person's really good absolutely brilliant. So I went and said to her, so she had feedback for validation. She was so happy. But what she said was the reason that she was doing it was because of the training she got related to it. So, it's joining it all up, but it does start with that initial connection and having somebody who is personable and accessible. It's that language accessibility, and actually, why are we doing this? What difference is it going to make to us in my day-to-day job? Well, actually, quite a lot. Let's look at that. So it's that. So be real about it, I suppose.
It is so important. What's really good for, like, as social scientists, I think we spend a lot of time trying to argue about changing this idea that kind of researchers and participants should be completely separate, and you should be a kind of blank clinical slate where people can't see your emotion or anything like that. And actually, what we know from research with kind of care homes and older adults and people with dementia, that having that person being personable, taking that time to get to know someone, doesn't change the science, it doesn't change the research, but it changes people's willingness to take part. It changes how they feel about taking part, and it's kind of, I suppose, validating up for us to be, because that's what we have to kind of argue a lot of the time. This is why we need a bit more time. This is why we need these resources. It's not to change the research design necessarily, it's just to spend that time and to be able to feed that back.
That taps into another important ethos of co-production of research as well, is that mutual benefit of your day, how it impacts your day-to-day work, but also what you get out of it, like chocolates or training or, for giving your time, I suppose. Recognising that contribution is something real.
It is easy to give and give and give and feel like you're not getting anything back. But actually to get something back, and sometimes it can just be a simple email from somebody saying, thanks very much for your time. Actually really enjoyed talking to you. Something as simple as that. And it sounds really obvious, but it isn't. And people don't always go with it because they're busy doing their own thing.
Being able to feed back to the staff and say, I've heard back from the researcher, the whoever it is, and they loved that you spoke to them and that you gave all this really, really rich information. Actually, you see them stand up that little bit straighter and go, oh, that was me. And because they don't maybe get that from, especially when it's something online, you won't get that at all. You'll get your thank you for doing this. But when it's either face-to-face or it's a group and they're given lots of information, for somebody to say, that was really good, well done, you do see them get, a wee bit prouder of themselves.
Shona, do you find that the people that agree to do it and get that positive feedback are more likely to do it again?
Yeah,
we're the same.
Absolutely, 100%.
It's like, I can do this.
Especially considering my staff at the start were just like, no, get lost. And I was like, no, you will do it. And it is the same. You get your few key staff who are like super keen, and they can see that whatever feedback they put into it is going to have a benefit. Then they'll pester everyone else to do it, and all of a sudden you've got like waterfall. That's not the word. Cascading effect.
I think the main challenge, as mentioned before in other sort of areas, is time. It's the time to be able to commit to participating in research. And that can be from a personal and work perspective, because we've tried to sort of enable people to take part in research by saying, we'll give you time when you're at work to come off the floor, so arrange it on a day you're working. But that's not always practical either, because 9 times out of 10 somebody phones in sick and it's really difficult to get that person that protected time, and people's own time is very precious to them. So trying to find the time to take part is definitely something that's incredibly challenging. Again, the readability, people being able to understand what the process is, what's written, and the expectations. I think we all worry that we're not going to be able to provide information that's going to be of any benefit. Everyone has that sort of question in their head when we say, this is a research study that's out just now, they would really love volunteers. And we have a lot of staff come in and they're like, I don't think I would be of any use. I don't think I've got what they need. And I don't know how people would overcome that idea that their voice isn't of any worth, because every voice is worthy. But people have this expectation that they have to be doing something amazing and have a really great story to tell for their voice to be heard.
I think that's a really something that I think I was obviously aware of, but that idea of almost imposter syndrome for taking part is something that I'd not really thought about in practice, I think, because obviously we feel, particularly as researchers who do this more kind of qualitative approach, if you like we kind of go, of course you've got all this information, we'd love to learn from you. But I hadn't thought about how a lot of people do kind of go, oh, I might not have the right information or the right answer, or maybe that imposter syndrome to be a participant. And maybe that's something that, in fact, it's definitely something we need to think about as researchers, about how do we boost people's confidence that their voice and their experience is of value, and that there's not a one size fits all.
And sometimes it's the not knowing that is actually what's important. It's the identifying that people don't know about something is what is going to be achieved, because that's just important as people having lots of knowledge, is knowing where the gaps are.
Absolutely. Have you noticed any solutions or interventions that have worked particularly well? How people approach, say, time in the way they present a study, or anything that you think is a good option for how we encourage other researchers to do things?
I think there has been quite a lot of research that's come out, and it's been the flexibility of time. So that is, not everyone can be flexible, and I totally appreciate that. We all have diaries and we're all struggling to try and find time for everything. But the researchers who get involved with us and say, actually, you tell me a time and I'll try and fit something in. It could be 7 o'clock at night if need be, because they recognise that most of our staff are on 12-hour shifts. They don't want to be on their day off, or they just need a quiet space that they feel that they can sit and process. And to me, that's also better for the researcher, because if you're wanting, for example, somebody to give their honest views about how they felt, for example, during COVID, then you need a time where they can actually reflect on that while they're talking, not while they're thinking about the people outside the door or the people that are running back and forward, or I've got to get my lunch in 5 minutes. And so I think that's been really helpful. And again, talking about the posters and videos that have been coming out, I think when people can see what research that they've contributed to, where it goes, I think that gives more people that opportunity to say, oh, well, he done that, and this is actually what it came out as, and I can understand that. I know what the answer to this was because I can see it in a video. So maybe I'll get involved in the next one. And people don't want to feel as if somebody's just sitting barking questions at them. It can, I suppose, that they probably feel that's not valuable use of their time. Whereas when things are more in a natural conversation, or when things are made more fun, then it's more enriching for both parties. So if you feel you're getting something out of it yourself, then you're more likely to do it.
And Diane, have you noticed any interventions that can help address some of these challenges?
So, a solution or intervention that would address a particular challenge is knowing people. I haven't personally seen this, right, but I do know people who work in care homes, and if I personally know people and tell them about the research, it's easier to enthuse people. So kind of word of mouth sometimes does help, but at the same time I'm like, oh, should I really be? So it's a bit difficult, because I think there is other means, and obviously I think if I was working in that environment, and I remember when I was working in the care home, I was still very enthused about research and wanting to talk. Maybe I was just a big mouth, but I liked change, and I wanted to do something about it, and I got very passionate about it. And I think you need somebody like that who talks to the other staff members, who talks to their family members, who kind of keeps everybody informed and likes learning themselves, likes knowing, and is not nosy, but is very curious and likes to hear other people's opinions. And I think although it's not in place at present, I do kind of like, we have kind of discussed before about having a research champion in care homes, like your infection control champions and everything, but that is very much at the discretion of managers within care homes, and I really don't have much influence on that, which is a challenge in itself.
It's a really important point, and I suppose so. Our next question was actually about the accessibility of current research, but I think it sounds like straight away one of these key issues is about the language use and the accessibility of what research even means before thinking about what, say, the actual research study itself is, but how that is communicated to you and who's communicating it and how they come across. Are you able to give us a bit more of examples really of that kind of accessibility in the current research that you've been involved in, and or maybe even what makes it not accessible for people living and working in care homes?
I think accessibility is wonderful because so much can be done online now, but so for my staff, that's great. They can scan a QR code often, fill out a survey, or I can send them the link and they'll fill it out, whatever that is. That's really good, and it's really, really quick and easy to do. Generally, they're not all that onerous to do. But for my residents, I would have to find the time to sit with them to do it. Would they feel comfortable answering these questions with me or with my staff? And then there's the whole problem of, do we then get somebody else in to speak to them? Are they going to tell them the same thing that they would tell somebody else? Because a lot of my residents do have dementia or some form of cognitive impairment. So they may give you the answers, but it's maybe what they think you want you to hear. I think that's really difficult. And then with the families, it's actually quite similar. Although they could just scan a QR code, I don't think the families always realise how helpful their input is, especially when it comes to research in care homes particularly, because they are a massive part of what we do. And it's not always appreciated and it's not always understood. And maybe they don't have the ability to be scanning QR codes or going online, because a lot of our families are older or maybe just not tech minded. So again, would they feel comfortable doing a paper one and handing it in? What do we do with all of those? It's the processes part of it is quite difficult.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's been really quite sort of tricky. I think a lot of the things that are kind of shortened to the point that we can advertise and put around the home for QR code scanning or whatever for the staff is absolutely fine. I think some of the bigger projects, that they feel that maybe they're being interrogated or watched or something. And again, it's about trying to get through to them what the bigger picture is. Why are we doing this? And I think that was a really good point that Shona had made earlier. If you know what the end is, then it's more likely that you're going to engage with it. But we don't always know that. I think for those people living here and their relative, yes, it is a bit harder. But I think, take up a slightly different point, I think if you've got somebody who's really interested and engaged in research to kind of bang that gong, i.e. myself and Shona, because of our links with, the things that we have been involved with, all of us are like, yeah, let's print that off. Let's make sure they know, look, this will be a really good one for you. Have you thought about this? Look, all you've got to do is answer a few questions. You'll get a £20 voucher, which I have to say is always a good incentive. People will do it, but somebody has to do that. And that to identify somebody like that within a care home, I would say is really, really vital, because otherwise you will just get lost in a whole plethora of emails from literally everybody that you can possibly imagine, and it's what makes it different. And again, I think that's the relationship building part. I mean, the person that emails us always sends a really bad joke with them, but we look out for those jokes, we look out for those corny bits, and it's engaged our receptionist, who wouldn't have even thought about looking at them, but she always kind of gives it a mark out of 10, usually very low. But it's a way of interacting. It's a way of an in, if you like. And I think one of the other things that I'm very conscious of is that a lot of the people doing research are either doing or have done PhDs. So these are people that are really clever. Now, that doesn't mean that they necessarily know everything, but for a layperson, they are just like, we're not going to be speaking the same language. And I think that's one of the things that I really enjoyed with Chip being part of Enrich, is that we're able to sort of, from a very practical, down to earth, everyday level, inform what's happening, because it's a case of actually you can't really do that because that's not going to work in this setting. And you know, academics that don't work in the setting are like, really? Oh, okay then. But the key thing I think that sets a lot of the researchers apart is that they listen. Because I'm sure that there's a lot out there that don't. And if they listen to what we're saying, that actually makes it more viable. And you actually think, do you know, maybe I can make a difference. And I think when you see those little changes, then suddenly it actually makes it more attainable, more accessible.
Yeah, and I think on the back of that, at our summer fair last year, we had Enrich come along, and it was one of the guys, I think it was Bernie from Enrich, and he said, you know, I didn't actually do a lot of research discussion, but it cemented with him that it's about stories, it's about real people and real lives and real relationships. And it was really nice to have him there and to have him be able to chat with our residents and our families as well as the staff.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're trying to do with Rich Voices as well, isn't it? It's about trying to get some of that personhood out there and to create that shared language, because you're absolutely right. You get so used to using certain words, certain terminologies, because if that becomes your language of academia, for instance. And I know that whenever we've done co-production stuff, it's all been about going, right, which words are just wrong? How do we change them? But it's almost like that should be the researcher's responsibility, to change their language and to learn the language that works for other people, rather than expecting, you know, residents, people living or working in care homes to understand a language that they're not exposed to every day for various reasons. So I think and it's really just good to know that personal touch is making a difference, and you can see that impact.
Do you want to add anything to that, Diane or Kirsty?
So I think one of the biggest accessibility issues for everyone, and I suppose from our perspective, with most of our experience being through staff, is the accessibility that comes around time. Most research projects that we've been involved with have kind of put a base minimum of it will take about an hour to talk through everything, and actually an hour's quite a long time for a member of staff who is on the floor working to come off the floor. And a lot of staff members don't want to do things in their own time because it's very precious time for them. With regards to the residents, again, it kind of talks about it's being inclusive and being able to get the insights of people that maybe have cognitive impairments and wouldn't be able to necessarily follow a long train of conversation, might not understand questions that are asked. And I suppose it's getting the need to get quite creative and getting knowledge from residents.
Have you found that the language that is being used has got any more accessible in terms of the research information that comes to you, or are you finding that you're still having to do a lot of that kind of translation of research yourself?
I think we're getting there. I think there has been progress. Big part of that would be, again, going back, looking at research articles. I feel quite able to read a research publication and understand, but I know a lot of my staff wouldn't. But now we've got the likes of videos and poster presentations, which really help that, because the infographics and condensing to really the important informations makes it much more accessible. But at the same time, I think it's the other side of research. It's actually at the involvement stage that we have to think about the videos and the infographics, because we need people to understand why they're doing research, to actually get involved in it. And I think sometimes the sort of, this is a proposal, can be quite lengthy and quite wordy. And we found with some of the ones we've been involved with that we've had to say to staff, hear it, get involved. This is actually what they're looking at, because by reading the actual proposal, they'd be like, oh, I don't know what that means. And they do know what it means, it's just different words.
I think that's exactly it. And the fact that, you know, it's not something that's difficult to understand when put in the right language, but when presented in the way it often is, it just creates that barrier. It's good to know that's improving, though. That's positive. We'll take that as a win.
Well, I think that's a nice place to wrap up our discussion. A huge thank you to Kirsty, Diane, Shona and Cheryl for joining us. It's been really interesting to hear your different experiences and to hear that while there are challenges, things are improving, and it's positive to hear that more people are aware of care home research. At Enrich Scotland, we hope to contribute to making care home research more accessible to everyone, particularly care home residents, relatives and staff. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to our second Rich Voices podcast episode, where we explored care home research from the perspective of care home staff.
If you've enjoyed it, please follow and share as it helps others find the series. If you have any feedback, we'd love to know if you found it helpful, as it can shape our future activities. You can follow us on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and you can find out more about Enrich Scotland's work on our website. Thanks for listening.